What's up everybody, welcome to the channel. In this video we're covering the absolute basics you need to know in order to get started using the command line on Mac. We're only going to cover three things: how do you access the command line, how do you execute commands, and then how do you determine what commands do. If you've never touched the command line before, this is the video for you. So with that, let's jump right into it. The command line is just another way of interacting with your computer. You type a command, you execute it, and it does exactly what it needs to do. Now, in order to access the command line, we need an application that can run a shell. We'll talk about what that is in a moment. The application that we need on Mac OS is called Terminal, and this is available on any Mac machine. Once we have Terminal open, we can look up here at the title bar. Directly in the middle is the name of the shell that's running. Another name for a shell is a command line interpreter, and all it does is translate the commands that you write, and then it executes them. Now, this particular shell is called ZSH, and there are a number of different shells out there. They share similar syntax, but the commands that you write may vary from shell to shell, so it's important to know which one you have running. To the left, we have what is called the present working directory, and this is just our location in the file system hierarchy. It's important to know where we are in the file system because the commands that we write will interact with files in that directory or somewhere relative to that directory. On the right side here, we have the window size, and this is just 126 characters wide by 36 lines tall. If we come down here to this gray box, that is the cursor for the command line. If I type, you can see those characters there. Immediately before the command line, we have what is called the command prompt, and this just gives us information about the current state of the shell. The first piece of information is the user that is currently logged into the shell. When you open up Terminal, it's going to default to whoever logged in on the computer's profile. Now, if you know the credentials and username of another profile on the computer, you can log into the shell as that user without logging out of the profile for the OS itself. The second piece of information here is the machine host name. And by default, this is just the machine that we're working on, so my MacBook. But you can also log into a remote machine. And so that might be somewhere in a cloud, or it could be another person's computer who has given you access via the internet. The next piece of information is the present working directory. It's exactly the same as what is seen up here. This tilde character is just an alias for this home folder. And then the last piece of information is this % symbol, which just gives us information about the level of privileges that we have in the current shell. Unless you log in as a user that has higher privileges, chances are this is what you're going to see most of the time. Taken all together, the command prompt just lets us know that the shell is ready to accept a new command. So at this point, we can go ahead and write one. So we'll start with the hello command, and if we type that and then hit enter, it'll execute. And as we can see here, ZSH says command not found. And that's because the hello command doesn't exist. I made it up. Anytime you execute a command that doesn't exist or that the shell can't find, it'll let you know in this fashion. So let's type a command that actually does exist. And this one is the clear command. If we execute it, it clears the window. And at this point, you might be wondering, well, how do I know what commands I can write, and how do I know what those commands do? If you're just using the shell and the tools that are built in, chances are that you're going to Google, how do I do XYZ using the command line? The problem with that is that if you execute a command and it does something that you don't want it to do, it'll be tricky to undo the effects of that command. The way you undo commands in the command line is by writing a command that reverses those effects. So it's not as easy as hitting Command Z to go back. The good news is we have the man command, which allows us to look up exactly what a command does. So if I type man clear, this will open the manual page for the clear command. There's three main sections here. The first is the name of the command. The second is the synopsis, which tells us how to structure the command in order to use it. And then last, the description, which just describes what the command does. If we want to exit the man page, we can hit the Q key. Next, I'm going to open up another terminal window just so that I can open the man page for the manual command. And from there, we'll talk about the synopsis. The synopsis begins with the name of the command. After the name, we have what's called an argument. An argument is just a value that we include with the command in order for it to act upon it or use it to determine what it should do. For example, the name argument here is just the name of the command that we want to open the manual page for. Some commands don't take arguments. The clear command is one example of that. If you see an argument in the synopsis, then that means that it's required. However, if you see an argument in square brackets, that means that it's optional. One example of that is this section argument shown here. If we want to know what the arguments mean or what they do, then we can look at the description section in order to determine that. Sometimes after an argument, you'll see this ellipsis here, and that means that you can include multiple of that argument. So in the case of the man command, if I want to open multiple manual pages at a time, then I can just include multiple command names. So for example, if I type man open ls, then it'll open the manual page for the open command. And when I close that, it'll then open the manual page for the ls command. Next, we have what are called options. These change the functionality of the commands that we write. Just like optional arguments, they appear in square brackets, and we differentiate them from optional arguments by noting that they are preceded by a single hyphen or a double hyphen. If we want to determine what an option does, then we need to look at the options section of the manual. Most commands will have this, but if it doesn't, then the information about the options will probably be in the description section. Now, when we want to execute a command with an option, we need to write the option before the argument. So I'll type man-w and then clear. And when I execute that, it shows the location in the file system for that manual page. There are three kinds of options. The first are single letter options. In this first set of square brackets, we can see them here. Single letter just means that A, C, D, and F are all separate options, and we know that because they appear with a single hyphen out in front. In addition to this, they are case sensitive, so lowercase f is different from the capital F option. Single letter options can be written together or separately, and all that means is that if I type man-abc, then that would be functionally equivalent to man-a-b-c. Next, we have full word options. For example, this path option here is just a single option, and we know that because it's preceded by a double hyphen. And then last but not least, we have options that can take in arguments of their own. For example, this -m option takes in an argument called system. Both single letter options and full word options can take in arguments, but just like commands, not all of them do. All right, that was the last thing we needed to cover. Today we talked about how do you access the command line, how do you execute commands, and how do you figure out what commands do. But that said, there will be more. So if you learned something and you like what you saw, then give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share the content. Till next time, peace.